Shel Silverstein is responsible for entertaining generations of children with his books. The Giving Tree, Where the Sidewalk Ends, The Missing Piece. All of these are staples to many people, including myself. But what's sometimes remembered when thinking of these books is a rather unsettling photograph. This is a picture of Shel Silverstein found on the back of The Giving Tree. Many young readers have expressed mild distress when coming across this photo. It's hard to put into words, but it conjures up a feeling of unease, perhaps even something uncanny. It's not that he's ugly, but Shel doesn't look particularly happy, even though he's smiling. The smile itself almost looks painful. As one Reddit user puts it, "When I was a kid and I read this book, I was surprised at how Shel Silverstein looked. I thought he looked like he had just stepped out of Cell Block D. It was a wonderful lesson about judging people by their appearance and not the character and content of their minds." While many are aware that Shel wrote his own stories, some may be surprised to hear that he also illustrated his own books. A Light in the Attic was released in 1981 and features 135 poems written by Shel. One of them, titled Skin Stealer, features this strange illustration. It shows some sort of naked creature, its eyes close together and mouth curved into a distressing smile. It's pulling on someone's skin like it were a pajama onesie. The amount of fingers in the illustration is also very off-putting, and the fact that the creature looks to be getting satisfaction from the macabre action is the icing on the cake. SpongeBob SquarePants is known for featuring imagery that has scared children. One of the most talked about cases belongs to the episode I Had an Accident. In it, SpongeBob has become too afraid to leave his house. Eager to get him to come outside, Patrick and Sandy attempt to fake a gorilla attack, only to come across a real gorilla instead. He stuffs the real Patrick and Sandy into a bag and attacks them, which makes SpongeBob finally go outside in order to save them. Then the gorilla grabs SpongeBob and tears him in half. SpongeBob apologizes to Patrick and Sandy for causing all of this, declaring that he's no longer scared of going outside anymore, but is terrified of gorillas now. When SpongeBob asks what the gorilla is doing underwater in the first place, the gorilla panics and flees on a horse before they can question him any further, leaving everybody, including the family watching the episode on TV, confused. The sequence in and of itself is very odd. It utilizes animation and live action and meshes them in a way that feels uncanny. Many other television shows have done this as well, like Courage the Cowardly Dog or The Misadventures of Flapjack. The major difference between those instances and I Had an Accident is that most of the time the change in art of the animation only lasts a frame or two, while the gorilla attacking the trio lasts a full scene. Not to mention that the family looking at the camera in the end is a fourth wall break, which is something that a lot of children probably don't understand. Of all the children's authors, Roald Dahl is perhaps responsible for some of the most memorable stories. Matilda in particular is the story of a girl who develops telekinetic powers and uses them to defeat the story's main antagonist, the school principal, Miss Trunchbull. The story would be adapted into a film in 1996. The story follows many of the same beats laid out by Dahl's book. One in particular features a disturbing scene where Miss Trunchbull accuses student Bruce Bogtrotter of eating a piece of her chocolate cake. As a result, she makes Bruce eat an entire chocolate cake in front of the entire school. Bruce starts out strong before quickly slowing down and growing sick. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what was so scary about this scene. Perhaps it was the idea that, as a kid, eating an entire cake by yourself sounds like fun, But when made as a punishment, it takes the fun thought and turns it into something much more sinister. Many adults struggle with emetophobia, but I'm sure some children do as well. Watching this scene is like waiting for a bomb to go off. You're waiting for Bruce to spew the cake all over the audience at any moment. The suspense is tangible. Lucky for Bruce and lucky for us, he is able to finish off the cake successfully, much to the excitement of the children in the audience. Many people have expressed distress when seeing or hearing emergency broadcasts. This is completely understandable, as they are often there to warn us of something bad coming. But what about FBI and anti-piracy logos? Oftentimes, they have invoked a similar feeling, but do not promise the same impending doom or danger. These messages would often play before the movies I rented or owned on VHS. The silence accompanying them, the low hiss of static as they faded on screen. Their messages were direct: 5 years in prison or a $250,000 fine. It seemed like the FBI was watching through the screen, agents on standby, waiting for the moment piracy was to occur. The use of colors is always changing. Here is the late 1990s red palette, and here you'll see the mid-90s retina-burning green palette. In addition, these days, anti-piracy warnings don't mention the type of media, but law enforcement and the industry use to explicitly warn against copying things like video cassettes and laser discs. Do you remember seeing messages like this in the glow of your TV in the middle of the night? The Adventures of Milo and Otis is a film from Japan following a cat and a dog. It would later receive a release in the US, where it would enter the home of many young children. The plot itself is relatively basic. Milo and Otis are friends on a farm before accidentally getting separated. They eventually find one another again as adults. As you can tell, the film employed the use of real animals. Even as a kid, I always thought that there was something odd about some of the situations these animals were put through. What I thought was distressing as a child, such as the scene where Milo is crying as she floats down a stream in a box, is distressing for a different reason as an adult. Allegedly, many animals were killed during the making of the film. Animal welfare organizations alleged to have had a number of complaints from people who had seen the film and were concerned that it could not have been made without cruelty. The film was reported to have the approval of the American Humane Society. The American Humane Association attempted to investigate cruelty rumors through contacts in Europe who normally have information on movies throughout the world, but everything has led to a dead end. Regardless, the controversy surrounding the film has persisted, with many of its young audience returning as adults to find the film very disturbing. As Russell Rogers writes, "The way I can explain this is there are two movies that people will see here. One is the story of these two animal friends trying to make their way back home after an adventurous accident and coming across an assortment of creatures along the way. And if you see this movie this way, then it's actually fine. The story makes sense in their universe, the characters face thrilling challenges, and it's mostly an okay movie for children if you don't mind them seeing live animal birth taking place. But if you see this film as something created by humans using small animals that are put in very stressful and dangerous situations, well, the film feels entirely different. Seriously, someone literally put a young cat in a wooden box and filmed it crying while floating down water rapids and over a waterfall. Also, they clearly tossed a real cat into a pack of seagulls and filmed it being viciously attacked. There's a scene that looks like someone tossed a live cat off a really high cliff into water. And for you dog lovers out there, they had a black bear fight with a pug in a river." As it would turn out, sometimes your childhood fears are completely rational. When perusing the shelves of the library, many might recall this lasting image. A Bad Case of Stripes is a book written by David Shannon. The cover shows the titular main character, Camilla Cream, as she lies in bed looking rather sick. The story is about Camilla, who secretly loves lima beans, but pretends that she doesn't in order to fit in with her friends. As a result, she wakes up with colorful stripes all over her body. This is just the start of her transformation, however. From here, she grows viruses, bacteria, and fungus colonies on her body. The only thing that can save her is eating lima beans once again. For many young readers, A Bad Case of Stripes is the introduction to body horror. The illustrations themselves have been characterized as disturbing and troubling, and some even say grotesque and oppressive. Unfortunately, because of this, its message about self-acceptance and peer pressure are often overlooked, with many children frightened that if they do not eat their lima beans, they too could have a body horror breakdown. The fear of masks is a common phobia among children and adults alike, and for good reason. Not being able to see one's face or expressions puts the question of identity into play. This notion extends to things like mascots as well, one of the most predominant children's mascots being Chuck E. Cheese. Before the look of Chucky was updated to appear more friendly, it went through various rudimentary stages that have since scarred generations of children. Take, for example, this iteration from the 1980s. The rat has its usual gray fur, but this version has a yellow and red vest. One of the most unsettling aspects of this version are the eyes. In some pictures, the overall size of the mascot is very intimidating as well. The 2000s saw a notable change in Chucky's design. The eyes and his smile are much more inviting. Despite this, some have still expressed fear when seeing pictures of Mr. Cheese. Hi, okay, I'm a 28-year-old female. I want to make this clear. Just because I tell people about this and they think it's silly or that because he's a rat, it's not that. It's that costume. Its face on the wall I avoided so hard. It panicked me since I was 7. I have never had another fear of anything close to this. The ordinal costume, the head, the little strip of wood created for his head, I never looked at that side of the room. It's almost unbearable for me to see. Sorry for the lack of detail or background. I just really want to get this out there. Nothing happened to me. I did not have trauma there. Another aspect instilling fear was the animatronic band composed of Chucky and his friends. They were often positioned on stage to perform as people eat. These animatronics always struck a chord in me that the mascot did not. The entire band, despite their flashy and fun outfits, have a lifeless presence. The contrast of this was very confusing, especially as a child. Jamie Shannon is responsible for one of the strangest shows to ever be broadcasted on Nickelodeon. Mr. Meaty, which debuted in 2006, follows the misadventures of Josh and Parker, two friends working at a fast food chain in a mall. The show uses puppetry to tell its stories, and as some have mentioned, the puppets themselves are nightmare-inducing. They are a far cry from Jamie's previous show, Nanaland. In one of the more infamous episodes, Parker eats bad meat, which leads him to getting a tapeworm. In order to get it out, Josh puts a piece of sausage on the end of a fishing line and fishes the tapeworm out of Parker's stomach. Eventually, a character named Larry shows interest in the tapeworm, swallowing it down himself. One of the recurring characters on the show, Edward Roger Carney, is the man responsible for the Mr. Meaty food chain. He is over 100 years old and has blue skin, green eyes, and yellow teeth. He is often seen riding around in a wheelchair with an IV hooked up to him. Needless to say, his appearance is highly unsettling. The show itself is often described as a fever dream, mixing fart humor and odd subplots, like a goth girl eating her hand after sticking it in a deep fryer. Mr. Meaty would come to an end after 4 seasons due to a mix of low ratings and criticism regarding the show's content.